And hello, all you dads and mums out there. Thank you for coming back. I am Nadir Pop,
And I'm Peter Pop.
and welcome once again to Pops in a Pod.
Nadir, that last episode we talked quite a bit, huh?
Yeah, man. I mean, considering what we had planned for that episode and what really sort of, turned out, and I think we just spoke about two things. We spoke about partner compatibility, and we spoke about the right time to have a kid, and we have like a whole list pending. It's just the tip of the iceberg, I think. We have so much more.
We definitely scratched the surface in there. And I think this episode is going to be a lot more fun, probably a lot more engaging for our listeners also.
Informative. I think it's going to be very informative in terms of the kind of things that we experienced as parents, as dads, and what our wives also went through, and what we did together to sort of reach this stage in our lives.
True that. So let's dive straight into Planning to be Parents Part 2.
Part 2. So Peter, that day I was listening to our Prime Minister Narendra Modi's speech
All right.
on Independence Day, 15th August. So he said something very interesting, and it kind of got my ears all perked up. He spoke about how India is in the midst of a population explosion and how we need to really control, this massive population growth, and how we need to somehow
Yeah, I
suppress
think that's like one of the most common things. It's like, how they say, right? 1 in 6 people in the world is an Indian.
Yeah, exactly. Correct. So it just kind of got me thinking, and I was like, "Chal, let me do a little bit of research. Let me see what's going on online." And Peter, to my surprise, India is actually going through a population slowdown.
What?
Yeah, I know. Exactly. I was surprised myself. So I don't really want to throw numbers or anything, but I read several reports, and it said that if we were growing at, say, a 2.5% growth levels, we've now come down to 1.6. And the southern states are growing at less than 1%.
Wow. So that's like...
So yeah, we're kind of going down, which is kind of strange because the whole worldview, the way it is.
But in a way, when I'm thinking about it, it's just kind of in line with what's going on around the world also. I mean, we're all aware of, we've all read about what's going on in Japan, where, there are no young people. And if you look across in Europe, I think that's a similar scenario in countries like Holland and Western Europe at least.
I think even Italy, I read about that, how the population growth has been
And the biggest
zero.
problem is, if you look at it from an economic point of view in terms of just the job market, there are a lot of people retiring, but there's nobody there to take their jobs, which is a bit scary if you think about it, right? How does your country run with no young people?
Yeah, I mean, when I go back and think about my grandparents, since you spoke about, the whole old population, my granddad had 13 siblings.
What?
And my grandmom had 11.
Okay, so
Both were in double digits. I could probably get the specifics wrong, but yeah, I think there was some one grandparent had 13, the other one had 11.
I would have said, whoa, but then again, my grandmom was one of 8.
Oh,
And my grandfather was one of 5. Which, when I'm thinking about it, is a lot. I mean, like, of course, my grandmom was the youngest, so she kind of said that her older siblings kind of brought her up, and I'm pretty sure it was a very similar scenario with your family. But, for us in 2019 to kind of think about what was happening back then and just the sheer numbers, I mean, I don't think they lived in huge houses to begin with, but wow.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine like 13 kids of yours running around, right? I can't even look beyond that one daughter of mine. I just can't. I cannot possibly imagine if there were even 2 of them or 3. Okay.
Yeah, but I think age gaps kind of helped in there because, like, for my grandmother, her elder sister was 22 years older than her.
Oh,
and
wow.
That's a huge generation
That's like
gap.
a parental gap almost.
Yeah, almost. So, like, there was a whole generation gap. But, yeah, man, I mean, finances that kind of comes to the top of my mind when I think about it. And
I agree. You just took the words out of my mouth. That how did they sustain? How did they sustain like 13 kids plus obviously parents and jobs, businesses, trades, whatever that they were doing? I'm hoping they were happy, right? I mean, with that massive family plus extended family and whatnot. But how did they manage their finances? How did they sustain, in that kind of an environment? Today, I think it's practically impossible.
yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I wish I had a lot of insight into how things worked back in the day. Talk to my great grandfather and say, "Hey, man, what's up?" But yeah, I mean, part of the reason when I talked to my grandmother, at least, she talked about people having many kids because of child mortality back then.
Yeah, I suppose
So
that's true.
that played a big factor in there. I mean, I am talking about 8 siblings of hers that I know. I mean,
Yeah.
7 siblings. Sorry.
That you know of.
I am talking of 7 siblings of hers that I know of.
Yeah.
I think there were a couple that passed away before they.
No, that's true. I think a similar case with my grandparents as well. There were many siblings who did pass away because of lack of medicine or any kind of medical technology, or that type of medicine available for that particular
Yeah.
illness or whatever it is. But for me, keeping all of this in mind, I think finances will just pop right up in my head. If I was in their place, I would only be thinking about how am I supposed to manage such a massive family with the kind of income that I'm getting.
So yeah, Nadir, you brought up earlier about how you wanted to have only one child and stuff like that. What kind of role did finances play when it came to taking a decision like that?
See, for me, and the kind of background that I come from, finance and financial planning is of paramount importance in my life. So when you go on this journey, right, where you're going to introduce a completely new member into the household, trust me, there are going to be some massive changes. And over here, I'd like to give credit to my dad, who really, really helped me understand the importance of savings, right? So whether it's through investments or whether it's through, spending on things that you only need and not really get into, whatever luxury or unnecessary.
I see a parallel with my family also in that end, where, you want to be very prudent, and, the phrase is always there, save for a rainy day. So that kind of is ingrained in you from your childhood. So that kind of really helps once you turn mature, from the time you get your first job, I think also, right?
No, that's true. And for me, I think even if you keep kind of leave the work bit aside, for me, when Sabia kind of came into my life, I think it was very clear in my head that she also has to be a working woman, not from a financial standpoint, but from a freedom standpoint, right? From the aspect that she also kind of needs to go out and live her life, do her own thing, chase a career. But at the same time, you also want to kind of share that financial responsibility, especially when it comes to children, so you know that you've got each other's back. So for me, finance becomes very important, not from an individual standpoint, but together as parents. It becomes so important.
And I think I completely agree with you, because from the very outset of our relationship, Karen and I always discussed, the benefits of having a double income household. And of course, we saw the benefits of it in the start of the marriage. But once we started planning to have a child, we saw far more benefits in there, because you've invested from the beginning itself. And here, the compounding interest really, really is on your side. And the earlier you take a decision like that, you see the benefits only far later. I mean, of course, in the short term, you are complaining that, oh my God, my money is getting blocked out, when I will see it, what I will do. But just look at the prices and the way we talked about inflation that's happening in there, man.
Yes, inflation is definitely a point that has to be considered. But Peter, that comes, probably a little later. It's the initial financial responsibilities that you have to kind of chalk out. So your savings, your expenses, expenses also will have to be now segregated into cannot do without and sort of workable, right? So your immediate daily needs, your requirements, even if you've been going out a lot, as a couple, whatever it's partying or weekends or traveling, you need to sort of rein that in depending on how much money you're making. Then you've got your investment instruments, whether you want to put it into mutual funds or leave it in your savings account or put in fixed deposits. Like there's so much that is required to ensure that, okay, you know what, I think I'll be able to not just sustain, but we can definitely live a decent life with the way that we are kind of planning our finances right now.
And I think also you have to consider that the kind of background or the kind of upbringing you've had, every parent's dream is that their child has a better upbringing than them. And when you kind of have that outlook, no matter what the sacrifice is in the short term you have to make, you always, like when you keep your eye on the ball, or when you have that vision that, this is what I want or aspire my child to do, that keeps you going in the long term, I feel. And just kind of having simple goal setting up smaller short-term goals, which lead into long-term goals, really helps you. And for me, I found that very important, is keeping things in check. Like, for me, doing the MBA, but post that, I'd already considered, because the MBA was an expensive affair, but I'd considered that, we will have a child. So there was a kind of saving that I had done before that. So it really helped me later on.
No, absolutely. I think that's such a smart move. Once you're thinking ahead and you know what's about to come, and if you've planned for it, then it doesn't really hit you hard if things change a little bit, because you expect in your mind that, okay, this is what I'm kind of gunning for. But even if there's some sort of a course correction that's happening from a financial standpoint, it's all right. I've got some form of backup. But I'm glad you brought up the whole long-term bit. So for me, long-term financial exposure would be my daughter's education. So I need to start saving up right now. So whether I need to invest in insurances or whether I need to kind of park some money aside so that hopefully in 10-15 years it'll grow to a decent amount where I can give her some decent education, from a college standpoint or whatever it is. So for me, that becomes very important. And even if we have to kind of sacrifice on a few things here and there personally, it's okay, man. I think it's totally worth it.
That's where did you have a financial planner that kind of guided you through a process like that?
No, not necessarily. I think I sort of burnt my fingers at every step and then I sort of realized that.
So you had a trial and error.
Yeah, a trial and error.
For me, I had like a financial planner kind of work with me in there. And, for the first few months, I was just like, whoa, because, you see your savings kind of getting diverted in there. But every time I thought about it and I realized, wow, this kind of money is being parked aside, which is readily available for me at any given point when I want to put it into education. Similar to you, I have money being parked aside every month for my son's education.
No, exactly. And I think that's the smartest way to, move ahead, considering that both of us have jobs, our wives have jobs. We don't run our own businesses, or we are not entrepreneurs, so we don't really know what's going to happen, whether we're going to get fired or whether we'll move on to something that doesn't pay us as much. So planning in advance, I think, is a smart thing to do. And again, focus on your short-term goals and your long-term goals, and accordingly see how you want to sort of park your funds away. So yeah, for me, finance right up there, very, very important when building a family, starting a family. I think that's probably one of the reasons why I want to stick to one kid. Peter, you mentioned that Karen also works, right?
Yep.
So was work-life balance a discussion before your son came along?
Man, for me personally, I find a lot of people who talk about work-life balance a little like aspirational in a way, or it's like one of those unattainable goals, because having worked both in marketing and advertising agencies and stuff like that, there are times you're pulling all-nighters. There are times where, there are really stressful situations.
Absolutely.
And similar for Karen with her job also, where she has to attend events which are post-work hours. and stuff like that.
You mean
But-
like how we are doing this podcast at 11:30 at night?
Something like that. And so, when I talked about in the last episode about finding a like-minded partner, I always kind of looked at someone who worked in a similar field like me or had a similar work ethic like me. I mean, I didn't expect, to find someone who worked a 9-to-5 job, really. But yeah, man, for me, the work-life balance would be you kind of know where you draw the line between work and when you kind of spend time with your partner, or in recreational activities which you mutually enjoy also. So there were times where we'd go out for movies and stuff like that. As you can imagine, that has drastically dropped to zero probably. Yeah, there was a time where we kind of saw all the latest movies that came out in town,
Yeah.
and we watched including the flop ones.
I was just going to say, that even including the rubbish ones, you just don't have nothing
Yeah.
to do. You're just going to watch the rubbish ones as well.
Yeah, because that was the way you kind of spend time together, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was not about the actual movie that really mattered.
True.
So I would say that finding, mutual interest, that's where it's really important. Both of us loved traveling and wanting to see different places, explore. We enjoyed it far more doing it together. And I think that is where it's really important. Of course, there are going to be times where, you're pulling all-nighters, your partner is completely angry at you when you show up at home. But what keeps you going is that that, when there are tough times like this, there are also great times where all you do is probably just stare into each other's eyes and hopefully not the phone.
Phone. That's a separate topic altogether. So do you know, Peter, that I would have not really ended up with my wife.
What?
Yeah, it's true. And it all started because of work-life balance. I used to work with BBC Worldwide way back. We used to produce shows, and my timings were, anywhere between 15 hours to 18 hours. And
Pretty hectic, I can imagine.
like pretty tough times. And I also just happened to be going out with Sabiha at that precise moment. So clearly for her, it was a bit of a cultural shock, because she's a very, not exactly a 9-to-5, but very structured kind of a worker. And she knows when to start work, when to stop work, when to go back home, when to sort of unwind, not carry work back home. And I was a
Wow.
I was a complete
So
opposite.
that's quite a contrasting
Completely contrasting. So for her, it was very alien that I don't show up home because I have shoot and I have to travel so much. And so one day she just gave me a call and she said, Nadir, I don't know what you're doing. I'm not even sure if this is going to work out. And this is just like us 3 or 4 months, sort of into 2 or 3 months into our dating lives. And that kind of hit me really hard, And I kid you not, Peter, from that day onwards, I don't think I have seen those days again, or those 15 hours and 18 hours days, because it got drilled in my head by my wife that, oh my God, that's true, that if I continue doing this, there is no life between us, right? She's not going to be sitting at home waiting for me to just suddenly show up one day, or, because I used to work weekends as well. So I think that kind of really hit me. And for me, work-life balance becomes very important. Though I want to clarify that, yes, I do bring back work home nowadays sometimes, and she gets really annoyed because I'm on the phone when we should be spending some time together. But that incident really did change me a lot, and I really understood the value of, the work-life balance back then. I really sort of savored it. I said, yes, this is how it should be, because now we are spending time together. Now it's our lives, and if you plan to bring a third one in, it better be really...
And I think, again, there's a huge contrast when you're dating to when you're married.
Correct.
And
Absolutely.
that makes a huge difference. And then, so the further you move on into your marriage and you're going closer towards having a child, and that's when a kind of switch happens naturally in your head, I feel. Because for me, that's when I realized also that this is where I need to draw the line, because there was something I look forward to, which I call the highlight of my day. When I go home to my son, he runs into my arms, or I carry him in my arms.
Yeah, I really look forward to
And
those
you
moments,
just forget
honestly.
everything else, whether you had a shitty day at work, whether your boss was screaming at you, or your client was screaming at you, whatever. It's all forgotten, because there's that pure, unadulterated love that you're getting in there, and nobody else matters at that moment.
Yeah, that's really sweet, Peter, that you can actually disassociate yourself from the better part of the day that you've spent outside your home. I try, even till this day, I try really hard, but those few calls creep in sometimes, and that really gets everyone in the house nagging, and they know, okay, enough with the phone, just drop it, leave your work behind.
So this goes just to tell you how smartphones have really like changed family dynamics. I mean, imagine 10, 15 years ago what it would be like to bring up a family with no smartphone around.
Yeah, no,
and more than anything else, you're constantly supposed to be on, right? Because you have a smartphone.
Yeah, which is happening right now with us. Correct. You're constantly on the phone. You're constantly doing something or the other when you know that you should be spending physical time with your kids. And I think that's where the whole work-life balance sort of gets amplified, because you know that there are certain things that you now can do and cannot do. You have certain responsibilities that you have to sort of manage. For example, between me and my wife, we had to kind of decide that, when the child comes along, there'll be morning duties, there'll be, night duties. I'll be sitting at home. I won't be working. I'll be going completely nuts in my head. So you have to be there emotionally to support me, physically to support me. Don't be that guy who's just sitting and doing absolutely nothing and giving orders. You have to be involved as a parent. I think that really sort of, I mean, I knew that I had to do it, but the intensity with which she said to me, it dawned on me. I said, this is going to be tough. This is not going to be easy.
And I think, that's the kind of stuff you'll never read in any book. No one kind of preps you up for it. For me, I must add at this point, while my wife was still in the last stage of her pregnancy, I would see you when we were working together actually stop work and say, you know what, I'm going home. I need to do this. And I must really appreciate you for that, because it kind of set an example for me, and I was like, whoa, this is the guy I should be like when my wife delivers. This is the kind of guy I should be like when my son is born or my daughter is born. I need to be doing that. So it was good for me to have a reference point, and it helped, of course, that we both worked in close proximity to each other. So it kind of rubbed off in a way.
True. That's true. I really am thankful, Peter, that you did notice that. But yes, I made it a point to leave home at a certain time so that I can go back and I can spend time, not just being a babysitter, but sort of making sure that I'm taking care of the child, I'm bathing her, massaging her, putting her to sleep, whatever, reading,
and
whatever.
I think
that
that's
happens.
where the misconception lies also, and I must address this, is that for a lot of people, whichever parent is doing more of the responsibilities kind of gets the tag of the nanny or the babysitter. But there's no shame.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, bathing my son, just spending time with him, or just lolling around on the bed, tickling him and stuff like that, you're not going to get that time back.
My kid needs to know that I was there for her. Right? Yeah. I'm not going to be that guy. My dad was there somewhere, but my mom took care of me and did everything for me.
And I think
I can't possibly not be a part of that conversation. I want to make sure that my kid needs to know that, yes, I was always there for her, not just because I want the world to know that I was there for her, but I wanted to be with my daughter. I wanted to be with her at every step. And, that's where the whole work-life balance comes in. And I think we've spoken about this earlier also, that we are kind of privileged to be living in our own homes with our own set of parents who have that whole, who give us that support, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like my parents are always there taking care of my daughter. And I think that also was a planned move, where we had to kind of make sure that we told them that, listen, my wife and I would be working, we would need your help at any given point of time. Don't get me wrong, we also had decided to have a nanny for my daughter when she kind of came along. But it's always nice to know that you have a certain support group, whether it's a hired help or whether it's help available at home. So that's also very important from a planning perspective.
No. Similarly, I'm very, very grateful to my in-laws, because the kind of support I've got from them is invaluable. I mean, more than anything else, it's just, at sometimes you are unsure what decision to take in terms of what you're going to do. And just having it at the back of your mind that, there's somebody who has your back. You have a different level of confidence when you take decisions, because, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to fail, but you at least have some support at the end of the day. And yeah, man, I think we can do a separate episode on nannies. I have a lot of experience in that.
No, I completely agree. The whole nanny and support system would require a completely different episode with the experiences that together we've gone through. Absolutely, I completely agree with you.
Nadir, we talked about financial planning. We talked about the work-life balance. But there's far more to that, right?
I think I know where you're getting at, Peter. When two people come together, it's not just about the physical love, but the process behind it as well, right? The whole medical aspect of things as well. And
I think it's guys, there's of course that sex education class, which a lot of people kind of just breeze through for whatever reason.
Or they were just giggling and chuckling throughout.
Yeah. Man, I went to an all-boys school, so I don't need to say more.
I went to a co-ed school. Everyone was just shy and didn't want to really look at each other. So
yeah, so, as husbands or as dads, it's very different. And,
True.
There's a lot more.
Yeah, because, I learned so much more about the female body from a reproductive standpoint. Like, I wasn't aware about PCOS.
I'm not surprised. I was vaguely aware of what it is. I mean, so, you get the Wikipedia kind of definition of it and you know what it's like. But, once it enters your life and how it affects you, not physically, but it's far more than that, right?
No, absolutely, because your wife turns to you for support, and I think the first thing you'd probably do is that, hey, don't worry, I'm there for you. But in your head, you're thinking, what am I supposed to do? I don't know what am I supposed to do, right? And you can't sound like an ass. So you try and kind of work it out in whatever way possible, considering that PCOS affects 1 out of 5 women in India, and it's kind of, I mean,
it's more prevalent than people kind of think about it.
I completely agree. But when it comes to having a child, I think it becomes a bit of a struggle, right? I'm not saying that oh my God, it's going to be so tough or whatever, but I think mentally you need to be prepared for so many eventualities, right? There is this whole medication course that the woman has to go through, and because it's a lifestyle induced condition, there's so many do's and don'ts
and
attached
I think
to it.
At this point, everyone on Instagram is kind of an expert on something like this, doling out advice. Oh, this is what you should do. Drink this tonic
correct.
or
now
whatever.
I think everyone's an expert on everything. But when as you rightly put it, Peter, when it's a part of your personal life, that's where you really stop to think and understand that how do you want to kind of take this forward. Like for me, when we finally got married, I think we sort of made sure that, okay, you know what, we need to have kids. I'm entering my 30s. Sabia wants to be like a young mom herself, so that she can concentrate on her career later on. We had to really plan this out, right? With her medication, with timing, how we want to kind of go about having that child. We had to really get it right. But at the back of your head, you also had this really annoying, nagging thought that what if none of this works? Then what do you do, right? Do you take the IVF route, or do you take the surrogacy route? I mean, there were just so many questions in your head, and I think that got you more and more worried with that whole process of having a child. I think what did you go? Did you go through something similar?
Yeah, man. I mean, like, I still remember when Karen and I first discussed becoming parents, and it was like that, okay, let's address the elephant in the room. Okay, PCOS, how do we deal with it? I'm kind of figuring this out as I go, and I'm like, okay, of course, your initial reaction is support. But then it's far more than that. I mean, like you talked about it, because it's a lifestyle thing. So what kind of changes do you make in your lifestyle? stress is a huge factor of that. So you need to constantly be there emotionally for your wife. And yeah, man, I still remember, us having really tough conversations where both of us were kind of saying, okay, but what about this? But what about that? And sometimes you just make it out to be far more than it actually is.
I agree. We sort of had a similar thing where we did make a big deal out of it, probably because of all the information that we were fed, all the information that we read. Google obviously I think was the biggest culprit.
There's always one auntie that will be telling you that this is what you must do. And that all that pressure that's there.
In my case, I think the auntie was Google.
Yeah, dude, trust me. Like, the unfortunate part about today's day and age with medical conditions is you could be Googling one thing, but getting diagnosis for something else.
If you start Googling right now, in the next 8 hours, according to Google, you should be dead.
Yeah. So
that really puts a lot of, tremendous amount of stress on you already.
Yeah, so it makes a tough situation even tougher. But I'm really glad that we got through that far easier than I expected.
Oh, same here, because you had to try, right? I mean, you had to begin somewhere, and we were like, okay, you know what, let's just start and sort of see where it kind of goes, and we'll give ourselves a window of
same here.
trying out.
I think we kept a window of about 6 months or so, and then we're like, okay, we'll find out who the doctors are that we need to consult post that. And just the fact that we were discussing that kind of you're saying you're hedging your chances more against than for, the way I looked at it. But I was like, you need to be contingent, right? You need to have some kind of idea of what's the next step.
True. It's really funny when we made regular visits to Saviya's gynac, right? Because we told her that we want to try and we want to become parents soon, and she also sort of helped us out with not just medically but also just giving some kind of advice. And I think we sort of showed up at her clinic again maybe after a couple of weeks, and we said that I think we are kind of pregnant. It's like, oh great, bam, it just happened, huh? Like that. Like, yeah, bam, it just happened. So for us, all that stress that we sort of took, or all the thoughts that we had, which was good. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing in retrospectively now that I think about it, that yes, we were aware, we were planned, we knew exactly what the kind of steps that we probably would have had to take, maybe not very pleasant, but things worked out pretty well. But it's the knowledge of the knowledge of PCOS and what could become in case if you don't conceive naturally is important. I feel you need to know that.
And I think a lot of people look at it as, oh yeah, the woman has to deal with it, and I feel it's very unfair.
That's just rubbish, man. I mean, in today's day and age, that's absolutely rubbish. You could have a problem.
Yeah.
You don't have strong swimmers or whatever. I mean, maybe your sperm count is low, you are impotent. Could be anything, but somehow you'll never want to take the blame on yourself. It's just easy to shift the blame on the woman. So yeah, I kind of don't buy that point at all.
No, and I completely agree with you. So that's where I feel, emotions play a huge role. And having each other's back and support is really, really important. Tough times will come and go. But, these moments that you spend together are priceless.
Me and Sabiya had to be emotionally in a stage where we had to accept certain outcomes. And I think we were ready for it. And again, you read so many reports that parents who don't conceive or who can't conceive, they go into depression. And we read all of those things and we were like, what if we are one of those? We are reading these case studies about other people. What if we become those people? So yes, emotionally it did take a toll, but again, we just had to be prepared for anything that happened. So yeah, I mean, in a way, I guess I'm glad that you are where you are and sort of I am where I am as far as kids are concerned.
I agree.
Peter, give me a truthful answer.
All right.
How many names did you shortlist?
Oh boy, man. So it's strange because in a country like ours, you have to be prepared with like boy names and girl names, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You can't just say, "Ha, nahi, ladka hi hoga," and I will just keep boy names.
Yeah. I mean, like I've heard of stories of people abroad, kind of finding out the sex of the child in advance, just so that it's probably easier to do shopping and also keep a name.
No, absolutely. Fortunately, our country does not allow sex determination, which is a very, very good move I think the government has made. So yeah, in a way, it's great. We don't have to do any of those things. And then the whole surprise element, I think, kind of gets killed off completely, right? Like, I want to wait and see who's coming out and whether it's a boy or a girl. So yeah, that's why the names have to be sort of segregated pretty well.
Yeah, so for me, with a surname like mine, it was kind of obvious that...
say it, Peter. Say it.
Koti Kala Pudi.
Koti Kalapudi. I've finally got it. Not that I have a Ferrari surname. My surname is Kantawala. So yeah, I'm not really far off.
Yeah, but you know, with surnames like ours, you kind of want to keep a short name, right? Because imagine your child, and that's the way I looked at it. Imagine him writing like an exam or something like that, and then writing his name and taking like 4 seconds longer than other children, and that time he'll be cursing you, saying, "Dad, couldn't you have thought of a shorter name?"
You really went way far ahead on this one, didn't you? You've already reached exams and stuff.
Yeah, but that talks about the kind of...
Good thought. I like how you think.
So for us, it was very simple in a way. When this is something that, you know, as Karen and I were dating, and she got to know my family and stuff like that. And when she knew that, you know, I lost my mother about 10 years ago, she always felt that, you know, when we have children and when we get to that stage, as a tribute to my mum, we would name, if we had a daughter, my mum's name, Jane. And for me, that was really something that meant a lot to me. But similarly, in my family, we have a kind of tradition. I'm named Peter after my grandfather, Pedro Peter, when he moved to Bombay.
Nice.
So that kind of thing kind of flows in. So we had kind of flowed with names, and of course we knew it had to be 2 syllables to be a little specific, 4 to 5 letters maximum. I know it's technical, but that's the kind of planning we went into.
You put in a lot of thought in this.
Yeah, we did.
No, so I think in our case also it was not so intense. We didn't have any obligations to sort of name our long gone ancestors or anything. We for us it was important that the name sort of had some, I mean, it should be neutral, as in terms of sound. So irrespective of where the child is in the world, the name is easy to pronounce.
Oh yeah,
right?
and I think
I mean you've been through that experience. You've lived abroad most of your life, so I mean I'm sure you must have gone through that.
I mean, the number of times people have looked at me and said, "Your name is really Peter, but you're Indian." Oh my God.
So I think for me and for Sabia, it was very important that we have an international friendly name. So we obviously had options, but I'll be very honest, we really struggled with the girl names, because the girl names had such soft meaning, smile, dew, beautiful, light of something. And the boys are all like warrior and courageous and sword of such and such and flame of the something.
But
it's Lionheart. I mean, come on. And the girls have such softy names. Yeah.
No, but that's the thing, right? In India, I've realized, and that's the thing, talking about living abroad, no one really asks you, like, what does the name mean? But the moment you tell people that, oh yeah, I named my child this, the first question they ask you is, what does it mean? And I think that's where being prepared helps, because I had kind of helped name my son, I knew exactly what it meant.
That's nice. That's so even in our case, as I said, for us, I don't think there was any debate when locking a boy's name, but I think it would be safe to assume that we locked the girl's name right till the end. Like right till the end, we were kind of debating, and we were sort of in that whole not sure. I'm not sure if this name sounds cool. I think she'll get teased with that name because it rhymes with such and such, so and so. We actually went through all of that, but yeah, we finally did settle on a name, and when our daughter was born, we knew exactly what to name her. So
what's the process? You want to know what's the process of elimination Karen and I used?
Please, pray do tell.
No ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend's names.
Okay, that's intense. That's a fight waiting to happen. You fought. You guys must have had some fights, I'm pretty sure. I'm so convinced. No, thankfully that never even occurred our minds even once. So I think it was a unwritten rule. So Peter, finally I think we can close planning to be a parent. We've I think done a pretty decent job in highlighting all the important things that you must consider when planning to be a parent. For me, I think the top two in my head would probably be financial planning. I do look at my finances very closely, and so does my wife. So that's pretty important for us as to how we look at money and how we want to segregate and plan our finances. And the second one would be your work-life balance, because I think I'm a culprit in overworking and just forgetting family life, but my wife kind of brought me back on track. So for me, yeah, work-life balance and financial planning really plays an important role.
And we also touched on the medical aspect, which I think, is equally important in
True.
there. And especially the role that you play as a partner not only impacts your wife physically, but also emotionally. So being that support there for her is of utmost importance. And of course, man, what's planning without planning for your baby name? So yeah, you just want to be right there when your child is born, be able to call out to him or her with the right name.
That's great, Peter. This was a fun chat on the various aspects of planning to be a parent. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. If you have any feedback for us, please do write to us on popsinapod@gmail.com.
Yeah, and we're also on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for Pops in a Pod. Until next time, here's Peter Pop
and Nadir Pop. Thank you for listening.